So we must do two things, two great things together, to encompass that enormous new view that lies before us, but to encompass it within the framework of science, to see it within the whole categorical framework of science, and to see that these two are not separate, but that they are wedded. The bigness of the idea, the newness of the idea, the greatness of it is one with the structure of science, the structure of being itself.
So let us go on to look at that seventh day. And generally speaking, what are we going to see? What does love do? We feel how truth in the whole development from metaphysics to science and the development of consciousness, of man being the self-consciousness of God, being God's own consciousness of himself, how we have been led to the perfection of that fact, the perfection of creation. Actually, the sixth day at the point of love, truth as love, ends with the perfection of creation. The sixth day, which stamps the 6,000-year period, gives and brings to the 6,000-year period, therefore, all of those many opportunities. It brings the methodology for finding out what truth is, for discerning what truth is. It gives us science. It gives us the tool of science with all of its tools, and has its accentuation on the analysis of science. You remember that we have an illustration of what Mrs. Eddy refers to as the prism and lens of science. Do you recall that in prose works, in miscellaneous writings, she speaks about the prism and lens of science. We actually had developed that into an illustration, and if you recall that illustration, it shows us first how the whole subject, the whole question of God and what is God is the subject of science, the subject matter, the focus, the object, the subject and the object of science is God and what is God, and that it is science that answers the question, what is God? And it does that in one great way. It does that through the analysis of science. That science has two great aspects, the analysis and the synthesis. So these were two methods of science, to analyze and to synthesize. And that we cannot synthesize until we analyze. And so the analysis is that which we see first. And the analysis is the prism of science, where we take that great light of God, that great question, what is God? And we take the infinite, undifferentiated light of being, could even say the light of truth, the whole light of the truth of God, and putting it through the prism of science, that light is analyzed. Science analyzes what God is. begins to show us, just as we would see in the symbol of taking a prism and putting it out into the sunlight, that sunlight, that one great light, is differentiated, is analyzed into 7 hues, 7 distinct hues of light. Let me know if I'm getting this wrong, if somebody can be more precise. I'm just giving a general illustration here of what the prism and lens are. And so we see that the analysis, and this is the office of truth, to analyze. The analysis of truth divides or differentiates that light, diversifies that light into 7 great categories, so that truth is seen to be, the truth of God is seen to be mind, spirit, soul, principle, life, truth, and love. Just as we see in the 6th day, that we have those 7. Truth says this is what God is, all 7. And then on the way of science within our own evolution, we say, well, what is mind? What do you mean by mind? What do you mean by spirit? What is soul, principle, life, truth, and love? And so that prism again begins to work and to analyze and ask the question and answer the question, what is mind? Mind is power, mind is action, mind is intelligence, mind is the wisdom of God, the activity of God, the activity of the one mind, you see. And we get all of the ideas of that one mind. Then we take the light of spirit and we put that through the prism. The scientific methodology of analyzing what is spirit. How do we do that in the most practical way? We do it really by going to the textbook. We find in the textbook the question, what is God? We find the answer to the question, what is God? God is incorporeal, divine, supreme, infinite, mind, spirit, soul, principle, life, truth, love. Right? That's the prism, the activity of the prism, the actual, we see that prism of analysis right at work in the textbook. So it's to the textbook that we go to do our analysis. We analyze first what is God, we get the 7. Do we then really know, do we know what God is at that point? We only have the beginnings, don't we? Because then we say, well, but what is mind? So we have to find out what mind is. And we do that by going to every reference to mind in the textbook. So I pick up from the definition of God my fundamental 7. And then from those 7, I begin to go more deeply into the textbook to find out what does the textbook say mind is. So I go right to page 1 of that text, right to the first chapter on prayer. I can begin right on page 1. I'm told that mind is that which already knows. Mind knows. Mind knows something about what you're thinking. What you're thinking and what you're not thinking yet, but what you are going to think. What mind will make you think. What mind will make you want. What your desires are. How those desires will be molded. How they will be shaped. How they will be formed. See, so this is the prism. This is the prism within our own conscious approach to being, to finding out what being is, to being on that way, and it all belongs to the 6,000-year period, doesn't it? That analysis. And that analysis goes on, and it goes on and on and on over days, weeks, months, years, decades. It will go on really over the whole of your life, because that prism is always within you. You always have that side of science within you to analyze, to always ask in a new way, what is God? How can I see God in a new way? And in a practical way, we know that this builds up for us something that is tremendous, because we begin to build up a distinct, something concrete, a distinction within our own consciousness, a distinction within our own understanding of what God is, that we know what mind is, what spirit is, what those seven are, and we don't mix them up with each other. We would never mix up mind with truth. We would never mix up spirit with love. We know exactly what they are. And in a way, it starts out as though we have those watertight compartments. In a way, we need that rigor, you see, that being rigid in a way, that we don't deviate. We don't say, no, I'm not going to mix up the ideas of mind with spirit. I would never say that mind orders all, and that mind is unfolding. Not at that point. Not at that point. But in the pure analysis, we know our categories, we get our categories, we discern our categories from the textbook, and from the Bible, and from all the training tools that we have around us in the way of good tape recordings and wonderful books to lead us and guide us and train us up in that analysis. And so that is the prism of science. And this is the office of the 6,000-year period. To a very great degree, it's our training. But we see that science has another side, a complementary method. It doesn't just have the method of analysis, it has the method of synthesis. Ideas reflect ideas, and they reflect the ideas of every other synonymous term. Synonymous term can, all of the synonymous terms can reflect an idea, and all synonymous terms reflect all other synonymous terms. So this is the field of synthesis. This is the synthesizing. This is the lens of science, where we move from the prism to the lens and begin to see that everything that we have defined and analyzed and put into separate compartments, that being is not really like that. This is the essence of being when you analyze it. But being itself is totally synthesized, right? You never can go somewhere and find a big block of mind, huh? Or find a tub of intelligence, or a room full of wisdom, or everything is everywhere, right? This is love. This is love. Also, you see, in truth, we are very much focused on the linear, that one thing appears in an order and then something else appears and everything is in order and we follow step by step and so forth to completion. So we have a beginning, we have a middle, we have an end. Truth teaches us that linearity because we must have it, we must know it, we must become it. We must become trained linearly in the orders and trained in the order of science. Why? So that we can become, in the synthesis, non-linear. We become non-linear in the 7th 1,000-year period. So that lens is what then gathers the rays of truth back into a focal point, you see. Gathers everything back into oneness. And this is what the 7th 1,000-year period will show us. The 7th 1,000-year period will focus on the synthesis, on the bringing back of everything into oneness, on the integration of everything into one being, on the all-comprehensiveness of everything being included in one. You hear the two wings. Ideas are fields. They are can perhaps be symbolized in the present day as field. An idea is a field. It exists everywhere, at all times, you might say. It's an infinite field of information, a field of the expression of the one mind. And so that began to train us in the bringing together of everything instead of the taking apart of it. Analysis, in an analysis you take things apart so you can see what they are made of, what makes them be what they are. What makes that thing be what it is? God. What makes God be God? So we take it apart, and if we put too much emphasis on the analysis, we wind up with a lot of parts. Huh? And that's something that, our age, the age that we have just come through, and are coming out of and emerging into the 7th 1,000-year period from, that we had to watch, not to give too much emphasis, overemphasis to analyzing, because then you have a lot of parts and you don't see how they go together. You don't see that they're not apart. The parts are not apart. So it's a method that is absolutely necessary on the way of science. But it is only one side. It takes truth and love to bring out that scientific method of the analysis and the synthesis. But through the years, we cultured that training of how to blend. We began to see, oh yes, an idea can never stand alone. And it was so glorious to see how, for instance, an idea of mind like action wasn't just action, but action reflected everything else about mind. That the action of mind is creative, the action of mind is intelligent, that the action of mind really has an intention within itself, that action is, what else? Lawful. It's lawful. What else? Powerful. It's a powerful action. And that idea of action reflects all of the ideas of spirit. See that? So action is always working according to order. It's always working in a way that will be for us a development, the developing of the action of mind, the unfolding of that action, the raising up of the quality within me to separate that, to keep that action absolutely pure within my consciousness, that I don't mix it up with any other so-called action, with the claim that matter can act, or that the material senses can act, or you see, it's a great blending. By the time you take a single idea through all of the ideas of the 7 synonymous terms, you have a tremendous treatment. You've given a treatment. And this is it's a synthesis, it's a moving towards synthesis within our own consciousness.